Hi everyone, today let's talk about Fed Powell's comments, then we'll get into the economic data, as well as Max Payne, then we'll get into the charts, as well as my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Jerome Powell reiterated some of the things that he said during last week's FOMC. He said inflation is still very high. We have a long way to go to get down to 2%. Labor conditions are still tight, and he's projecting at least 2 more rate hikes. He said nearly all of the FOMC participants expect at least 1 rate hike, if not 2, which we did talk about during the FOMC meeting, and we're already projecting at least one of those hikes in July. Altogether, that would be another 50 basis points through this year, raising the terminal rate to 5.5 to 5 3/4. He also mentioned inflation. We talked about how that's continuing to come down, but core continues to stay quite sticky, sitting at 5.3% year over year. And then he kind of finished up by saying, given how far we've come, it makes sense to continue to go higher, but to do so at a more moderate pace, despite the fact that the Michigan Consumer Confidence Survey showed that their inflation outlook dipped to 3.3% for next year, its lowest level since March of 2021. Another thing that I like to watch is Truflation. They put out their inflation data, and they say we're currently at 2.42% in terms of real inflation, whereas the UK is up at 12.96%. Their inflation rates came back much hotter than expectations, and Truflation is saying they're actually experiencing much higher inflation than reported by the government. Not sure exactly how they calculate their data, but it is interesting to watch. Moving over to the economic calendar, 20-year bond came in at over 4%, which is interesting, quite high, higher than expectations. And then looking at tomorrow, we had Fed Waller very early in the morning. Jobless claims, I will be very interested in that. I want to see if this continues to tick up, if we are starting to move more into that recessionary type environment. Existing home sales, home market has been quite hot. And then we have Jerome Powell speaking once again here at 10 o'clock. And then Fed balance sheet here at 16:30. Always interesting to see how much they are currently offloading. Moving over to Max Payne, we had a couple of calls come into the market now. You can see 440 and 450, very, very high. Top of the puts is now at 446. You got a couple 444s coming in on the put side. 430, still a huge put wall. Not even at 1 million options yet. I would expect to hit there tomorrow based on these numbers. Put call ratio coming down a little bit based on those calls that we're seeing finally coming into the market a little bit. Max Payne up around that 440 level, so I would expect at least a little bit of a rally either tomorrow or the next day, as long as Jerome Powell doesn't say anything crazy. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps here on the 4-hour and the daily, you can see we got the cross here today of the 9 and 21 EMAs, so this is officially a shorter term downtrend at this point. We're below the 50 line on RSI, momentum is still bearish. I would expect to hit the 55 EMA somewhere around 432.20. You can see this daily chart looks even weaker, looking all the way down to VWAP around 427.19. Momentum, bearish, RSI, bearish, definitely looks weaker. Certainly could bounce from this point. Maybe we get like a double top or something like that. This is still a bull trend, and we haven't seen any kind of reversal pattern. We just have a peak and a pullback. So this could absolutely come back in, double top, or maybe even overthrow, set up a divergence, and then we get a bigger move to the downside. Really, I'd want to see it get above this 436.28 level before I would look to get long, or at least show some support on the 55 EMA here on the 4-hour chart. Moving over to the NASDAQ, very similar thesis, got the cross moving lower, 55 EMA sitting at 359.20, area of support around 360, and then you can see on the daily chart that area of highest volume sitting around 354.88. VWAP just below that, so looks like we're pulling back a little bit. You need to see it get below 360 for that bigger pullback to VWAP. Right now we're holding here, and similar to the SPY, we could certainly get a double top or some kind of a reversal pattern. Overall, medium-term trend still bullish, shorter-term trend showing some pullback. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the Russell held up quite well, 55 EMA, still holding here on the 4-hour chart. If this breaks down from here and we get below 183.28, that's going to be a significant bearish move, watching down to 179 or the 200 SMA sitting at 177.72. So looks like we're kind of rolling over here, but not quite yet. absolutely could hold and bounce back into this zone. Looking at the Dow, similar thesis, 55 EMA here on the 4-hour chart holding up, watching that 339.11 level. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple selling off, 182.37 is the level to watch. Just below that, 55 EMA at 182.10. We do have a cross on the shorter EMAs, but the medium term and longer term ones are still bullish. Could absolutely be a bit of a pullback, just like we saw here. Find support around the 55 EMA and then get a nice continuation. But either way, keeping an eye on this one. Tesla breaking below the 21 EMA here on the 4-hour chart for the first time in a very long time. You can see the last time we were even substantially below the 21 EMA was all the way back to the end of May. And now here we are selling off a little bit after hours, looking down at the 55 at 241. Ultimately, I still think 302 is going to happen. We'll get a dip, get a higher high set up. That'll be the culmination of this extended rally, but definitely showing a little bit of bearish signs going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to Microsoft and Broadcom. Microsoft has had a pretty solid 3-day sell-off down to the 21 EMA as well as VWAP. Momentum, bearish, RSI also pulling back. It's at a key level, but we've definitely seen moves like this where we saw a sell-off, huge gap up, continuation. We also tested the same level on 7 June, and then we got a nice continuation as well. Either way, looks slightly bearish in the short term, but could certainly hold here at 330.03. Broadcom also selling off down to the 9 EMA at 852.08, slightly below that level now at 847.66. If we pull back to the 21 EMA, that would be pretty substantial, down to 108.52. Taking a look at Roku and AMD. Roku hit our price target at 74.08, and it's now pulling back pretty substantially. It's below 64.95. Certainly could hit the 21 EMA. 200 SMA down at 60.11. Bounce from that level and then get a continuation. That would be quite bullish, but it's definitely showing weakness now. AMD showing that double top at that 132.45 level. Threw a big wick through those previous highs, and it's now selling off to the 144 EMA down at 109.68. We're below 114 now, and I wouldn't expect any kind of bullishness until we either test these moving averages and then we get a bounce, or move all the way down to 102.27, find support there, and then get a continuation. Right now, showing some bearishness. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples wicked the 55. Expected that to happen, and then we found a bounce. If we get above 74 here, that would be a nice bullish trade in my opinion. Higher low setup, rally up to new highs. That would be interesting. Discretionary, showing weakness. Expect the cross tomorrow. Selling off here at the end of day. Support is down at 162, which is about a 3-point move from current prices. Moving over to breadth. 50-day average actually was lower on the day. 200-day average showed a bullish candle, which is interesting. Momentum still fading. RSI peaked up a little bit, showing that this down move is not necessarily going to make new lows, and it might just be a continuation type move once we start to get that bounce. 200-day average showing a little bit more strength than the shorter term averages. Moving over to the dollar here on the 4-hour and the daily, showing weakness, selling off throughout the day. Big move lower, looking to take out this previous low and push down to 101.25. We rallied nicely, had a topping pattern, moved lower, and now this looks like a continuation move lower over the next day or two, back down to this previous consolidation area. Moving over to JNK and TLT. JNK, gap down, held in the zone at the 200 SMA. You would expect it to hold here if it's going to hold. If not, then we're pushing back down to 91 or 90.72 or so. Momentum's definitely bearish. RSI still bearish. But like I said, if it's going to hold, you want it to hold basically right here. TLT, on the other hand, continues to grind up a little bit from that 21 EMA. Not quite above 103.70 yet, but if it does get above that level, I'm watching for a pretty substantial push higher. Moving over to the volatility indices, MOVE index rejected from the 9 EMA, started to move a little bit lower. TLT looking to move higher, makes sense. VIX moved much lower today despite the down move in markets, which was interesting. Typically these are inverse, but right now it is moving lower as well as markets. Again, in my opinion, potentially showing that this is a shorter term pullback and that we might see a continuation going into the end of the week. Moving over to my accounts here, you can see the NASDAQ was down $5. Big move down, and I was down about $500 on my NASDAQ positions. So not too bad. I was able to cover a lot of those losses with some calls. My share position was down around 1,100, and I covered a little bit more than half of those losses with some short calls. I ended up selling a 363 put for 20 cents. That ended up being not such a good trade, but I'll get some shares there at 163. And I already have a 162, 164, and 165 call on for tomorrow to show some protection. I also have a 161 put for tomorrow. We'll see how that one plays out. I don't know if I'm going to hold that too long. If we get a nice pop in the morning, I might take that off. I do think markets might be showing a little bit more bearishness, at least in the short term, and I do want to minimize my losses as much as possible. IWM, on the other hand, was holding up quite well. I rolled that 185 call out in time here to the 23rd. Small little profit there already. And you can see that was positive on the day, which is what you like to see when you have a down day on the IWM, and I was able to mitigate those losses with the short calls. Overall, neutral to bearish, more bearish on the Qs. Let me know down in the comment section if you believe Jerome Powell and we're going to get 2 more rate hikes, or if he's just trying to talk a little bit more hawkish to scare the economy at least a little bit based on the strong rallies we've seen in the markets. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.